Okay, we are moving into our protein and nutrition basics next. So this is talking a little bit more about the building blocks of the food that we're eating and our fuel and making sure that we are still enhancing our performance. So first, what are macronutrients? You've probably heard of all three of these. They are basically the composition of the different foods that we eat. Now keep in mind first, before I even introduce them, that some foods are high in one macronutrient and then some foods are low in another macronutrient, but most foods are actually a combination of them. So even though we're going to talk really strictly about different categories of each of these, realistically they all kind of meld into each other, so you can get a lot of benefits from a lot of different foods. And if you start to track like we were talking about before, then that is a really good way in order to be able to see what is in each of the foods that you're eating. So next we're going to go into the actual categories themselves. So the first category being protein, second category being, I don't know why it says eggs. Second category being carbs, and the last category being fat. So protein, carbs, and fat are our three main macronutrients. Now we talked a little bit about those three last time because we wanted to talk about the grams or calories they had per gram. So just as a quick review, protein has 4 calories per gram. Carbs the same, 4 calories per gram. Fats actually have 9, so over double, 9 calories per gram. And then I also put that PS, alcohol is technically the 4th macronutrient. It gets ignored a lot because technically you don't need it, right? The other 3 you do. So keep in mind that technically alcohol is a macronutrient and it does have calories in it. So why does protein matter? We're going to talk about each of the different macronutrients, kind of the benefits of each of them and why they even matter. Protein is first. So protein itself helps us build and maintain lean tissue, aka muscle. It's all of the building blocks that we need in order to be able to gain muscle. It helps you feel really full, so it does have that satiation effect where it actually makes you feel fuller, and it helps you feel like more energized or more fueled. It is really essential for making sure that you are lifting actively and recovering actively. So this is both important for building the muscles and also making sure that we're recovering in between our training sessions. So next we're going to talk about some complete versus incomplete proteins. Again, getting a little bit nerdy for you, it's not a huge deal. The more important part is that you are making sure that you're consuming an adequate amount of protein. We'll kind of talk about how much you're going to need, but the idea behind a complete protein is basically any animal-based protein is going to be a complete protein. So that just means that it has all 9 essential amino acids that our body needs in order to be able to build that muscle that we were just talking about. However, there is a cool way for you to be able to create complete proteins out of some things that are not complete proteins. So again, thinking about proteins, we're thinking meat, obviously that's the first one, but also any type of beans, legumes, nuts, those are all going to have protein in them. A lot of grains and even some vegetables have protein in them. And then tofu and all of those types of options too. So really there's a really huge there's a huge selection of the different things that you can be able to select for your protein. It does not have to be just meat-based or animal-based in case that you're not a huge fan of that. Totally fine. So going back to our idea behind incomplete proteins, what you can do is take like a plant-based protein, let's say nuts, and then you can actually add it to a carb, and the profile of those two together can actually make a complete protein. Now the cool thing is you don't even have to eat them all at the same time. So realistically, if your diet is varied and you're eating a lot of different things, you're probably covering your bases. There are going to be some plant-based proteins that are a little bit higher in protein. So for example, beans themselves are actually kind of like a half carb, half protein. So that might not be the best source. However, there are some proteins some plants, that are complete proteins on their own, tofu and quinoa being a couple of the top ones. So there is a way to be able to get a complete protein. It's just a little different when you get it from an animal because the animal's already eaten the plant and made that amino acid profile for us. So it's like a shortcut, right? They already did the work. But that doesn't mean that you can't, be vegan or something like that and still be able to get all of the proteins and all of the amino acids that you need. So for your protein needs, there's a lot of different equations for this. This probably isn't even like the best or most exact one, but it's a really easy one. So about 0.8 grams per pound of body weight. Now in Building University, we actually find out what your lean mass is, and we use the Mueller equation to be able to figure out a little bit more exactly what you need. This is a great starting point though. So 0.8 grams per pound of body weight. So for example, if this gentleman here, 150 pounds, would need about 120 grams of protein. And that's one of the things that we want to make sure that we are prioritizing. A lot of people aren't quite getting enough protein in general, and then especially not enough to be able to help build that muscle. So we want to make sure that we are prioritizing protein, and then we can kind of break down the rest of the foods that we're eating after we have that protein number. So next we're going to talk about carbs. So when you first think carbs, you probably think pastas and breads and crackers. And yes, those are all carbs, absolutely 100%. They've also been demonized because that's what people think about first. Because realistically, this picture itself shows it great. Any fruit is a carb. Any vegetable is a carb. Any whole grain, beans, legumes, like we were talking about earlier, those are also super carb heavy. And so if we were to just demonize carbs altogether, then we wouldn't be getting the vitamins and the nutrients and the minerals that we needed that we can get from all of these awesome plant-based variations. So keep in mind, again, that it's not just the cakes and the cookies and the crackers. Yes, those are also carbs, but there are a lot of really good, really nutrient-dense foods that you can eat that are also in this carb category. On top of that, some of the benefits of carbs is it is the primary fuel for both your brain and your muscles. So if you weren't eating any carbs, you're probably going to be foggy, you're probably not going to have good focus, you're going to have a hard time building muscle. So realistically, they've been demonized, but for no good reason, honestly. Basically, it's because a lot of people have used and abused, as we talked about last time, years and years and years of eating, cake and Pop-Tarts, we'll call it Pop-Tarts, right, for breakfast, and eating croissants and these things aren't bad, but because we had so much of it, I used to eat almost a full bag of like Costco-sized pretzels when I was a kid. I would just sit there and munch on them. Goldfish, those were my favorite, right? And so because we had so much of that, our system just gets overloaded. That's really the only reason that the industry has pulled back so much from this like carb idea, is that so many of us had such a high preponderance of carbs over the years that we are starting to develop insulin resistance and or diabetes, right? So it's one of those things where it kind of has a reason behind it, but not the right reason. Carbs are not meant to be demonized, especially these whole grain, whole food carbs. Those are things that your body needs. It's a huge fundamental part of your building blocks. So we want to make sure that we are trying to still get those carbs in, even though they might not have the best rep. And again, this is kind of what we were talking about. So if you see here on this chart, minimally processed on the left looks like an actual food, right? Processed is going to be something that has gone through like any of the bars that we're eating, protein bars and stuff like that. A little bit of processing, maybe they squish it, maybe they cut it up, whatever, that's being processed. And then ultra processed is the stuff where they like take the different pieces and the different chemicals from everything that you're eating and then make this who knows what out of it. We've seen a lot of that, Cheetos, chips and a bunch of, So a bunch of junk food is basically going to be ultra processed. So our goal is just to get closer to the minimally processed side. That doesn't mean you can't ever eat processed or ultra processed foods. We just don't want it to be the most of the time, right? And that is, again, what gives carbs the bad name. So some good carb options: beans, legumes, fruits and veggies, whole grains, not just the bread and pasta. Next, we're going to talk about fats and why fats matter. So fats have awesome vitamins. It also helps protect your brain and your organs. Your brain is actually 60% fat. So please, by all means, eat some fat. And there are sources that are better than others. But we do want to keep in mind that eating fat from your food as a macronutrient is not the same kind of fat that's on your body. They don't have a good word distinction for it yet. And I think that a lot of people think that if they eat fat, they'll get fat. And it makes sense why you think that, right? They have the same word. But realistically speaking, it actually helps your body process a lot of things, including hormones and supporting your immune response. So they are actually really, really important. They're just a little bit more calorically dense, right? And so when you think about what we talked about earlier, 4 calories per gram, 4 calories per gram for the protein, the carbs, 9 calories per gram for the fat, you probably do need to eat it in smaller portions, right? Because it has twice the amount of calories, but that doesn't mean that it's a bad thing. It is actually still really beneficial to have it in your diet. So again, the misunderstood fats. There was a time through, I think, the early 2000s where fats were really demonized. Everything was low fat and they were cutting fat out, but to take fat out of a food and still make it taste good, they have to put something else in. So a lot of those foods ended up having more salt or more sugar or more processed junk in there. And so when you're looking for something, go for the full fat version. If you're gonna send it, send it, right? Because that often means that it's going to be less processed than if you were to get whatever that fat-free or low-fat version is. So that was something that happened, like I said, in the early 2000s. It's holding on a little bit. It's kind of eased up a little bit, which is really, really good. But we want to make sure that we do not, again, demonize fats because those are really important for our body as well. So this chart was kind of cool. On the left side is some low volume fats. These are the ones that are going to add up really, really quickly because they're kind of already broken down, right? Nut butter, you've already ground up the nuts. But the high volume fats can actually help you feel fuller because they look like more volume. They feel like more volume because they're in that full serving, basically. So that's something to keep in mind too. The higher volume that you're eating, your body actually thinks that it's eating more food versus this short delivery system, right? And you know, oils for your foods and stuff like that, that's totally fine. If you can, if you're doing if you're doing any type of food tracking, if you can include things like oils and stuff like that, just to be more accurate, that's awesome. But realistically speaking, you're not eating 100% of the oil that you're putting in the pan, right? So keep that in mind too. It's totally fine to cook with oils as long as you are conservative about it and that you're, you know, not using a ton of extra, like people put a lot of butter in like their veggies and stuff like that. A little bit for taste is fine, just we don't want to do a ton of it. So that's something to keep in mind too. And then another piece is saturated fats, not to get super complicated, but anything that basically drips grease, right? So if you think about like bacon, butter is in that category. Those saturated fats can affect you a little bit more negatively when it comes to your heart and cholesterol and stuff like that. So we do want to try to do more lean meats, do fats from foods like our avocados, our nuts, etc. But those are all positive fats, so that's totally fine to have in your diet. A couple more examples that I have here: fish, eggs, olives. Those are all going to have fat in them, and those are totally fine too. So in summary, real life benefits of having the right combination. You do need all three in order to be able to function. We know that we want to prioritize the protein like we talked about because that's something that is, one, going to help us build muscle, and two, is often neglected for a lot of people. So we do want to prioritize our protein, and then after that, split the difference. Maybe 60% carbs, 40% fat, but if you feel better one direction or the other, start to feel that out and see what works for you. See what you like a little bit better, and as long as your digestive system is complementing it and is okay with it, then that's totally fine, right? We want to see how our energy levels are, when we're eating what we need to eat, when we're starting to get the foods that we know we need to get, what that ratio kind of falls into, and it's not the same for everybody. So feel it out, see what's good for you, make those adjustments, and then just make sure that you're getting all three sources. It's going to help you with your energy and recovery, it's going to help stabilize your mood and focus, and help with your hormone balance, and it's going to help you perform better. So overall, please just make sure that you're getting all three macros and making sure that we are not demonizing any one food. It's not a good food or a bad food, it has a purpose. So we'll dive into that a little bit more soon.